Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
David Floyd Abel, Peter Henry Albright, Terry Lee Alexander, Alfred June Ambergi, Daniel Leon Anderson, William Theodore Anderson, Adrian James Anglin, Gregory Michael Ashford, Labrasi Lucian Baker, Ivan Lloyd Braggart Jr., Percy Beasley Jr., Herbert Stephen Bechtel, Ronald Dale Belarski, Joel Bernstein, Gregory Janos Bizet, Richard Wayne Billingsley, Roger Earl Bishop, Ronald Allen Boisclair, Raymond Augusta Brooks, Carl Lee Brown, Max L. Brubaker, Leslie L. Brucker Jr., William Harry Bullard, Ronald Frank Buss, Stanley Klaus Campbell, Joseph Edward Candias, Paul Duane Carmela, Carlos Guzman Cabral, Denzel Mason Carter Jr., Joseph Anthony Currency, Timothy Lee Carmody, Robert O'Neill Cato, Donald George Shamil, Anthony Phil Christopher, Richard DeWyatt Clark, David Lloyd Clark, Thomas Edward Clark, Michael Roy Klassen, Barry Bryant Coors, Charles Randall Cornett, Jeffrey Thompson Kramer, Jerry Lloyd Davis, William Thomas Davis, Guy Allen Davison, Alan George Decker, Ronald George Dixon, Leo Chester Dixon, Bruce Edward Dolbeau, Michael Banyan Dooley, Robert Joseph Dorshak, Thomas Jerome Dostal, John Francis Doyle, Michael William Doyle, James Edward Dozer, Billy D. Dwart, Oliver DeWitt Dumas, Carl Edward Dunn, Lawrence John Dunn, Gerard Joseph Dunn, James Wayne Emerson, Russell Allen Engren, Charles Reginald Farrell, James Augustus Francis, Joseph Ernest Funston,
Robert Ernest Graftunik, David Earl Garapi, Jeffrey Lynn Gieb, Terrence Neal Gentry, Charles Teddy Gilley, Carl Lee Glasscock, Barry William Godfrey, Edward James Gray, Dwayne Theodore Greenlee, Edward Roy Gruskinski, Elving P. Guitarras Oliveras, James Eugene Hall, Carl Ross Harbin, Jr., John Patrick Hirsch, Jr., Herbert Charles Hines, Charles Clifton Henderson, Felipe Hernandez, Stephen Randolph Hilton, Alan Lynn Heitz, Warren Dale Holden, Vernon Gilbert Hollifield, Frank Paul Hudak, Ray Lee Jackson, Alan Lee Jackson, Edward James Jacobs, Jr., John Jasso, Gary Edward Jensen, George Johnson, Stephen Allen Jordan, Edward Louis Jory Jr., Joe Kalealoha Kalamololo, Elias Mulu Kohani, Robert Michael Keene, Larry Robert Kelm, Thomas Edward Kessing Jr., Dixon Talmadge Kennard, John Joseph Kligar III, Arthur G. Klippen, Peter Stanley Knight, Robert Edmund Kuntz, Paul Francis Kostick, James Michael Kozlowski, Stephen Matthews Krink, Raymond Jorbs Krabetsky, Leo Neal Krinksk, Samuel James Larkin, Terrence Michael Lavelle, Michael James Lawrence, William Charles Lawson, Melvin W. Lay, Bobby Frank Limerick, Ronnie Lee Logan, Daniel Clyde Likens, John Daniel Malcolm, Vernon Arthur Mannheim Jr., Ralph Lawrence Massey, Harold Eugene Matson, Eddie O'Donnell McBroom Jr., Donald Lee McClanahan, Patrick John McCormick, William James McHugh, Gary Michael McCullough, Larry James McDonald, Michael Gregory McGill,
Charles Henry Meekins, Matthew George Medema, George Leonard Milan, David Michael Miller, Dorsey Mincy III, Danny Joe Mitchell, Byron Joseph Mitchell, Robert F. Monteith II, Jack Moss Jr., Francis Traynor Mulvey, Cornelius F. Murphy Jr., David Ellsworth Nelson, Bruce Jeffrey Nelson, Johnny B. Nesbitt, Mark Willard Newman, Steve Owen Nussbaumer, Ronald Patrick O'Rourke, Christopher Columbu Oakes, Felix Pacheco, Donald Wayne Parmley, Maxie Patterson, Marvin Robert Pierce, Jose Manuel Pena, Fred Daniel Penland, Robert Petracco, Calvin Bob Pierce, Paul Henry Percola, Jeffrey Willis Pajola, Raymond James Porter, Juan Manuel Quinones, Leland Eugene Radley, Terrell Lee Rawlinson, Daniel Diaz Rezende, John Allen Rich, James Burness Ritchie, Thomas Earl Ritchie, Andres Rivera Ruiz, Willie Clyde Robinson Jr., Benjamin C. Roller Jr., Gerald John Rosso, Keith William Rowell, Robert Anthony Ryan, Stephen Roy Sanders, Julius Mitchell Sanders, Richard Hugh Saveo, John Joseph Schmidt, Robert L. Scott, William Wayne C., Paul Roy Severson, Dennis Claude Sharp, Richard Powell Shelton, Walter W. Shipley Jr., Jerry Lee Simmons, Frederick Bryan Skaggs, Eugene Richard Skoke, Frankie Lee Smiley, Robert L. Smith, Fortune Smith, William Martin Smith Jr., Arden Jean Sonnenberg, Forrestal Alonzo Stevens, Jerry Melton Still, James Stingley, Thomas John Stapira,
Alan Peter Strazzanti, Glenn Charles Stromback, John Clarence Strome, William Allen Swovland, Raymond Massey Thompson, Eugene Turner, Carmelo Vasquez, Claude Franklin Vaughn, Gerald Lewis Vesey, Jasper Allen Voiles, Thomas James Walker, J.C. Walker Jr., James Franklin Watson, Ronald Lee Watson, James Barrington Westbrook, Carson Leo Whaley Jr., Michael Eugene White, Eldon Wayne Willingham, Edward John Woods, James John Zavaki,